Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Time to look at another big stack of metal zines. But before we get to that, what have I been reading book-wise? Not a whole lot actually, but the last book I finished was this, The Thief of Always by Clive Barker. I mentioned on one of my Halloween videos that despite being a lifelong horror fan, it wasn't until this last year that I started reading some of Clive Barker's work. And for the most part, I am indeed very impressed, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about this book. It's short, it's about 200 pages. Short pages at that, lots of blank pages, lots of illustrations. It's about a boy that goes to a fantasy world where he can basically do what he wants all day, every day. But of course, there is a whole lot of darkness behind this world. And so I really enjoyed this one. Speaking of books, I'm a big fan of true crime books. Not so much the serial killer stuff, I'm not into that. But like organized crime, drug dealers, all that kind of stuff. For whatever reason, I've read hundreds of books on the subject. And I don't know, maybe kind of fun to look at some of those. But people say, when your channel is way too general interest, it's definitely just asking for failure. But I'll think about that. So, time to look at the metal zines. I have begun a week's vacation off of work a couple days ago, and whenever I do that, I think back to my teenage years and some of those old Metal Maniacs and Terrorizer magazines that I threw out, gave away, whatever, and I really want those back in my hands. So I look on eBay, and if I can find a copy for less than 20 bucks, shipping included, I generally grab a couple. And so I did track down a couple of those old Metal Maniacs, and I'm pretty excited to crack these open. First one I'm going to look at is Metal Maniacs from December 1997. Amorphous on the cover. That must have been around the time of Elegy. That cover right away. Deceased, Fears on Dead Machines. Temple of the Morning Star by Today is the Day. Two of my favorite bands, two of my favorite albums. Right away, classic Emperor picture from Till the Welkin at Dust Days. I think they got an article on here for Tiamat when they released my favorite album of all time, A Deeper Kind of Slumber. I've said it a million times, but I just love Metal Maniacs. I just have so many memories of just being a teenager and hanging around the house and reading those, and it was literally like being a kid in a candy store. I just can't. I want to get that same feeling today, but you know how it is. It's hard to get it back. But I'm trying with picking up these old magazines. Another one. This is from February 1998. 6 Feet Under on the cover. This is when Warpath, the second album, first came out. The Gathering, Brutal Truth. You got Dimmu Borgir in like the up and coming bands to watch out for category. Voivod around the time of the Phobos album. Independent Label Report by Thomas Pascal. That might have been my favorite section of these 90s Maniacs issues. And right away, like Aura Noir, Marduk, Dodheim's Guard, Swordmaster. Do you remember Swordmaster? I would love to get a copy of that album, a physical. I saw a really badass long sleeve of Swordmaster on eBay, but just like a lot of things, a bit too much money they want for it right now. So we're going to look at a newer one right now. This is Metal Execution Magazine, issue 2. Again, I believe this magazine is affiliated with Head Split Records. In the past, I've looked at some Head Split Records magazines that were more like pamphlets. But I do think this is also affiliated with the label. I looked at the first issue last time. Big fan of this. Who do we got in here? Witch Vomit. Caustic Vomit. Some show reviews. Some record reviews. And a lengthy piece on insect warfare. You also got a insect warfare and witch vomit poster that came with it. Insect warfare, always a band that I'd hear about and never listen to, but I did take the time to stream a little bit of their music, and I was definitely impressed. Very intense, very ahead of its time. Next up, I'm Hotep. This is issue number 12. I have read a couple others in the past, but this one is apparently 8 years since the last one. And the last one, I think, was very based on Mayhem, Watain, and I think Abagor, containing several articles and interviews from all three of those bands. This one's a little different. You have maybe a third of the issue dedicated to Deathspell Omega, including one of their very few, and I say very few, like 2 or 3 interviews they've done. Cult Never Dies, who publish a lot of the great metal books these days, and who actually I think also published this very magazine for this issue. Heathen Deity, Dissection, Watain, Mare, and a handful of reviews. So, very in-depth interviews, focusing on just a handful of bands. The Deathspell Omega stuff, of course, very interesting. Lots of cool artwork in here. And definitely gave me a chance to dig into some of these bands I'm not too familiar with, such as actually right now I'm in the middle of reading this article by I believe Norwegian band called Gromf, kind of a more symphonic thing, and another Norwegian black metal band called Mare, M-A-R-E, not the kind of hardcore Canadian band. Again, a black metal band, and they have an album called Ebony Tower that I learned of through this very magazine, and definitely impressed by that. Next up, issue 38 of Necroscope. Necroscope is out of Poland. I've definitely checked out 3 or 4 of those issues in the past. This is the first one I've gotten that has this new presentation, kind of a course pack style binding, and some color pages, whereas the other ones were black and white and just stapled in the middle. Incantation on the cover, and they are definitely the biggest names, the biggest name included in here. Most of this is very underground death metal. Going back to some old magazines, I tracked down a copy of Unrestrained magazine from, what year was this? Okay, I don't want you waiting for me to find dates, but around the time of Morbid Angel, Heretic. There's Morbid Angel on the cover. Unrestrained, they were based out of Mississauga, Ontario. As much as Metal Maniacs is my all-time favorite, Metal Maniacs was the one that really, Unrestrained was the one that really got me excited. There was just so many cool things packed into each issue. I wish I knew what some of the guys that wrote for this magazine were doing now. Definitely don't seem to be writing metal zines anymore. Devoured Death, issue 5. Pretty sure this is based out of Australia, and the third one I picked up. What are the names you'll see on here? Chaosian, Belial. those are like the biggest names. Again, similar to Necroscope, we're talking very underground death metal here. Lots of reviews, the cut and paste, old school style. Definitely got a sense of humor in the interviews. Good stuff. Time again for Noxious Ruin, a zine that's very much based on, besides metal artwork and the artists that participate in that world. Again, you're going to see lots of full-page illustrations by many of your favorite metal artists. But what bands are covered in this one? Infest. You got a very lengthy Grave interview going into the whole history of the band. Articles on true crime stuff. Interviews with the artists themselves. And just interesting stuff overall, like Mortuary Skates. This seems to be like a skateboard company or a collective of skateboarders that are just really into underground metal. And this came with a poster and, like the last Noxious Ruin I picked up, a cassette sampler. Okay, a couple more to look at. There's another issue of Death in the Sun, underground black metal zine. Mostly interviews, a couple non-music articles, and some interviews. I brought up Death in the Sun before. Be aware, just some very sketchy political stuff in there. But I definitely read it just for the metal. Next up, a copy of Fistful of Metal. This is actually the only extreme metal magazine I can get at my local bookstore now. Decibel, I never really see them anymore. You need to get a subscription, at least in Canada. I never see it anywhere the last 5 years or so. And Zero Tolerance, I think it's been well over a year since they have put out an issue, despite not having officially folded. Every time I check the website, they say, check back soon, check back soon. So, yeah, this past December, I was a little desperate for some metal reading, so I did pick this one up. A little bit expensive. I think the thing costs you like 20 bucks Canadian. Winter Filleth, Orange Goblin, Leprous, Abath. But more than anything, what's cool in here is lengthy articles on things such as UFO, Michael Schenker, a lengthy Deep Purple piece, as well as a Scorpions article. So I definitely think they do a better job of talking about the old stuff as opposed to kind of a surface level coverage of the modern day bands of metal. And finally, just thought I'd throw this in. Hardly a metal zine, but I got this last summer. Black Sabbath, the Ultimate Music Guide, just does a pretty good job of discussing Black Sabbath and all things Black Sabbath. I like how it does give some of the lesser known eras their due, but on the other hand, there's also things that are a waste of time, like I think there's an article on the Osbournes TV show, and I think way too much coverage of the Ozzy solo stuff. This should be just about Black Sabbath, if you ask me. But, you know, again, Black Sabbath, my favorite band. Been listening to them ever since I was probably 12, 13 years old. But for whatever reason, last summer was just a summer of Sabbath and couldn't get enough. And this definitely helps set the mood. That's it for me today. I'll see you next time.